It was last September when my partner, Derek, and I walked into apartment 13, our last hope for affordable housing in Ashwood. It wasn't the best rated apartment complex, but we didn't have many options with our limited budget. We figured we could move here, save some money, and move out in a year to a better, safer place and work our way up. Inside, apartment 13 had a stillness about it. The cheap wallpaper clung to the walls in tatters, and the air smelled of wet carpet. The wobbly ceiling fan swayed, as if it might crash down at any moment. Our realtor Janice did her best to put on a smile, but her eyes said what we were thinking ourselves. Disgusting. As you can see, Lisa, she said, it's quite a steal for the price. Just needs a bit of TLC. Derek and I looked at each other, nervous, but decided to go for it. We needed a fresh start, and this was the best we could afford. The initial days in apartment 13 were pretty normal. We cleaned, painted, and tried to make the place feel like home. One evening, while I was searching for extra blankets in the bedroom closet, I stumbled upon an old shoebox hidden in the back corner. It was easy to miss if you weren't already looking up at the top shelf. My curiosity got the best of me. I opened it. Inside was velvet purple fabric. When I lifted it, I saw something I couldn't believe. A dried, mummified hand. I called for Derek, and he rushed into the room. We both stood there, paralyzed with shock, staring at the hand, its bony fingers twisted into an unnatural pose. That's weirdly realistic. Derek brushed it off as a homemade Halloween prop. But something was just too unsettling about the fingernails. I couldn't get past it. Under the nails, there was dirt tightly packed in. My best guess was that it was a mortician's doing. Maybe for practice. We didn't spend much time before Derek decided to throw it in the trash. We only had that day to finish cleaning, and we were falling behind schedule. A few months came and went. We were settled into our apartment. The neighbors across the hall took some getting used to. They seemed to have suffered from manic episodes. So many nights we had to put up with screaming and yelling at odd and unexpected hours. The noise-canceling feature on our earpods really saved us. I didn't really ever see our neighbors. Any of them. We could always hear them, but we never saw them coming in or out from their apartments. Derek and I kind of preferred it. We never had to make awkward small talk or deal with any strange encounters. Everything was better than we anticipated, living there, until one night. It was 2 a.m. and we were in bed. I felt Derek rubbing my back, along my spine with his fingers. Not tonight, I told him. He didn't respond, but he still kept touching me. I turned around to face him, but I immediately noticed he was in a deep sleep and his hands were tucked into his pillow. I told him to stop messing around, assuming he was pranking me, and went back to sleep. Another hour passed by when I began feeling my hair being moved. Then yanked. Derek, I yelled out. Derek woke up in a frenzy and looked at me with tired but wide eyes. What happened? He asked me, confused. You just yanked my hair, I exclaimed. He insisted that he had been asleep the entire time, but I found it hard to buy into that explanation. After some discussion, we eventually agreed it was just some bad dream, and he unconsciously grabbed onto me as a reflex. Derek's nightmarish episode left us both uneasy, but we continued to live our lives, working during the day and doing our best to ignore the occasional annoyance from our manic neighbor across the hall. Weeks went by without any more issues, and we gradually began to relax. Our makeshift home started to feel more like an actual apartment, thanks to our efforts to spruce it up. One evening, as we were hanging out in our living room, we heard a faint, rhythmic tapping sound coming from the front door. At first, we dismissed it as a random noise, but as the tapping persisted, it grew louder. We glanced at each other nervously and decided to investigate. Derek cautiously opened the front door to find out the mummified hand, which we thought he had thrown away, was back in the shoebox, but this time it was not alone. Wedged beside it was a handwritten note that read, "You shouldn't keep secrets." The hand was in a new position, with its pointer finger straight out with the others curled in, as if it was signaling no or maybe to be quiet. Panic set in. Our minds raced with questions. Who had returned the hands? Why were they leaving us cryptic messages? How did they know it was us? We then decided to talk to a neighbor and knocked on multiple doors, but no one answered. Seeing that we weren't going to get any answers, we decided to throw the hand away, but this time, directly in the dumpster hidden inside a different box along with other trash, hoping to conceal it from whoever first found it. This time felt like it worked, and we tried our best to forget about the fact a neighbor had originally stalked us. It wasn't until one night, a month later, Derek came home with the box we put the hand in. "This is some sort of sick prank," he exclaims. He handed me the note. It was a different one. It said, "3 may keep a secret, but only if 2 of them are dead." I immediately began to dial the police. The phone rang and rang, but it was never answered. The call ultimately drops. I don't think I have ever had 911 decline a call before. Shit city, shit law enforcement, he reminded me. Derek overnight shipped security cameras and set them up that night. We put the box back into the dumpster and waited for it to happen again. Then, it did. We watched the front door from the security app where we witnessed the box quickly thrown at our front door, with the stalker completely out of the frame. Derek and I rushed to open the door. There it was. The hand spilled out of the box and another note with no one in sight. We stood there trembling as we picked up the mummified hand and the note. The message on this note was even more ominous. "Your secret can see you too," it read. Derek noticed the hand was completely closed, and in between the cracks of the fingers, he saw something. "What is that?" I asked. "Grave." He cracked the fingers open, and inside were a pair of eyes that fell onto the ground like marbles. The hazy quartz eyes looked back at us. It was clear that someone was playing a messed up game with us, but we couldn't imagine who it might be or what they wanted. Derek suggested it was probably the manic neighbor from across the hall, so we knocked on his door. No answer. We continued knocking until we caught the same realtor, Janice, walking with another couple down the hallway. "Hey, Janice," I yelled. She looked at us like we were strangers and kept walking in the other direction. Unbelievable, we thought. We never realized just how rude people were in Ashwood until then. Derek and I had no choice but to contact the police again. This time, we insisted on going to the station in person, determined to make them take our situation seriously. We decided to leave out the main detail. We only told him that we have a stalker who has been leaving notes and harassing us. A detective named Detective Ramirez was assigned to our case. He was a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense attitude, and he promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. As we gave him with all the information we had, he promised us that he would look into it. Meanwhile, Derek and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak in the old building, every faint noise, sent us into a state of heightened paranoia. We hardly slept, constantly checking the security cameras for any signs of the mysterious stalker. Days turned into weeks when Detective Ramirez finally scheduled to visit our apartment to speak to the tenants. He called us to clarify our address, but the way he asked was strange, as if he didn't believe me. "What's the apartment complex number again?" he asked. 923 North 25th Street, Ashwood, I clarified. There was an uncomfortable silence for some time. I waited for his response when he finally admitted in a hushed voice, "Miss Lisa, 923 North is no longer an apartment complex. It was shut down 2 years ago for a health violation, asbestos and lead poisoning. It was making tenants sick, but it wasn't until there was a murder case in apartment 15 that the city ordered it to be shut down. It's a very famous case here. The tenant was found dismembered, but the murderer was never found." "Are you positive you gave me the correct address?" he persisted. My mouth was dry and I was unable to speak, let alone think straight. Apartment 15 was across from my door. "Sir, do you know who lived in apartment 13? Is that something you can look up?" I asked. He went into his system and tracked down information of the last tenant. After I heard his answer, I dropped my phone as I rushed up to the hallway. Derek followed me, confused. "What's wrong?" he nagged. "We have to get out of here now." This apartment complex was shut down 2 years ago when the tenant across the hall was murdered, and the person who lived in our apartment was Janice. Janice B. Doon. Derek looked back at me wide-eyed. Our realtor? He said back. She's not a fucking realtor, Derek. I ran to apartment 15 and tried to kick the door down. Derek joined in and eventually we got it open. There Janice was, naked, hunched over the bodies that belonged to the same couple we saw her walking with once. She looked up at us with a smile covered in blood. You know how to keep a secret, right? Our hearts pounded in our chests as we sprinted out of apartment 15. We ran down the dimly lit hallway, our footsteps echoing in the eerie silence of the building. Panic and disbelief took over me as we tried to make sense of what we had just witnessed. Janice, the woman who had pretended to be our realtor, had been a deranged murderer all along. As we reached the stairwell, we saw a small crowd of manic tenants. They were all standing there, staring blankly and making odd noises and groans. We knew we had to get out of that building alive and call the police. Derek and I bolted down the stairs, taking them two at a time. The knowledge that we had been living in a murderer's spiderweb terrified me for a long time. Finally, we burst through the building's front door. Gasping for breath, we stumbled toward the safety of the street. It was then that we realized we didn't have our phones with us. We had left them behind. Without wasting a second, we sprinted toward the nearest payphone. It felt like an eternity as we waited for the police to answer. When they finally did, we tried to explain the situation as calmly and urgently as possible. We told them about Janice, the bodies, and our horrifying realizations. Within minutes, squad cars descended upon the apartment complex. Police officers swarmed the building, rushing inside to arrest Janice. Derek and I were questioned extensively, providing statements about our interactions with Janice and what had transpired in apartment 15. As Detective Ramirez pieced together his research, the full extent of the horror began to unfold. Janice, it turned out, had a history of violence and unsolved murders. She used to be a realtor who lived in apartment 13, and according to her friends, she was a normal and happy girl until the lead within the wallpaper had a mental effect on her, leading her to enough mental instability to commit her first murder. She never evacuated the building when it closed, but instead had continued to live there and use her realtor license to gain access to unsuspecting victims looking for affordable housing. She grew an addiction to murder. The investigation uncovered a disgusting collection of human trophies in Janice's own apartment, which was then in an apartment 29. She moved apartments from number 13 to 29 when she felt she was being haunted by her first victim. The collection included photographs, personal belongings of her previous victims, and body parts. The fact we were so close to being her next victim still haunts me. In the days that followed, the apartment complex was taped off as a crime scene and the building was scheduled to be demolished once and for all. The case against Janice was strong, and she was swiftly arrested and taken into custody. Her capture brought a sense of relief, but the trauma of what we had experienced has haunted Derek and me for a very, very long time. As we moved on with our lives, we couldn't help but struggle to get past it. Our search for affordable housing had led us to apartment 13, an experience that had changed our lives and our ability to trust forever. We had escaped a real-life nightmare.